Kehilat Shalom. When I was rabbi in Norwich, Connecticut, the closest conservative synagogue was in New London, which is not that far, maybe 15 miles or so. And the rabbi there and I were good friends. We worked together. We jointly supervised the kashrut of a vegan Chinese restaurant. We got together to study Talmud at least once a week. So it was a nice relationship. And one day he called me very upset, and he wanted some advice. And he told me that what had happened, there was a couple that had come to him to discuss their impending wedding. And when he spoke to him on the phone, he said, "You're both Jewish?" And they said, "Yeah, of course." Came in, it turns out that the guy, he was from Long Island, Reformed, had a bar mitzvah, had been confirmed active in his synagogue youth group, active in Hillel in college. But what? His father was Jewish and his mother not Jewish, which means in Reform Judaism, you're accepted as Jewish, or in Reconstructionist Judaism, but not in Conservative Judaism. And he said, so when they told me this, I said to him, "You're not Jewish." And he got very upset, and they left very angry, and what should I do? And I said to him, what?
Don't directly say you're not Jewish.
Well, all right, what I said to him is, what you need to do is go out and buy a time machine and go back and don't tell the guy he's not Jewish. Okay, but yes, right, don't tell the guy you're not Jewish, right? Because his identity is Jewish. He's been living a Jewish life his whole life. He considers himself Jewish, right? So I, in such a situation, would never tell that person you're not Jewish, right? At the same time, by the rules of the rabbinical assembly, I can't do the wedding, right? So what you do is you say something along the lines of, look, I totally validate your self-identity as a Jew. There is a technical problem, right, which we need to fix. Right? And how do we fix that? Hatafadam, which everybody thinks is a massive big thing, but it's not. It's like no worse than getting your finger pricked to test your blood sugar if you're diabetic. It's just like a more intimate part of your body that's pricked, right? And then you go to the mikvah, and then voila, no more technical problem with your Jewish identity, right? Because our definition of somebody who's born Jewish, right? Get the question of conversion. If you're born Jewish, it's because your mother is Jewish, right? But here's the thing. Nowadays, in certain circumstances, the definition of the phrase or the meaning of the phrase, your mother is Jewish, is unclear, okay? And I'm not talking about intermovement issues of conversion, right? Like, you had a conservative conversion, but now you want to be Orthodox, right? Which we're familiar with, right? So from the Orthodox perspective, conversion not valid, you're not born Jewish, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about surrogacy, right? I'm talking about surrogacy because the egg comes from a Jewish woman, right? But it is transferred into a non-Jewish host mother. Is the baby born Jewish? Okay, or conversely, right, it's a non-Jewish egg, right, but it's implanted into a Jewish host mother. Is the baby born Jewish, right? And how, let me just throw it out there. What do you think? What do you think? Come on, I know you have thought, okay?
I'm trying to work it out.
Okay, you're trying to work it out, fair enough.
Yeah,
You can't have it both ways. Okay, so which way do we have? Do we have?
The genetics plays a prime role. If the egg came from a Jewish woman, the child was Jewish.
Okay, right? Dan says the genetics are key. Jewish egg, call it Jew, right? Just shorthand, right? Jewish egg implanted in a non-Jewish womb yields us a Jewish baby. Okay, Charlie.
There was a discussion that previous able to be on this topic, and I think it was the time there was some controversy between the Orthodox opinion and the other views, and I don't remember the exact being presented by the Orthodox decision was, but I remember it being obviously less presented than I remember it being said like in aggregate, but it be.
Oh, okay, I mean, that's one way to do it, right? I mean, right, so that it's not born Jewish unless it's genetically Jewish and nurtured in a Jewish womb, right? We could say that. Or like conversely, we could say, like the Reform movement says, right? Either parent, if you're raised Jewish, right? And this kid in New London, I'm talking about, was actually raised Jewish, right? You could say that genetics are determinative, or you could say, right, in other words, nature or nurture, right? And let me tell you, it is not clear, okay? That may be what Rabbi Goldstein was talking about. Okay, so let me, we don't just root these things in like feelings or emotions, right? We want to, if we can at least, root it in text. So at the beginning of Parashat Tazria, it says when a woman conceives and gives birth, right? When a woman conceives and gives birth, she's impure for a certain amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. But what is the problem with the phrase when a woman conceives and gives birth?
In this scenario, like a woman can conceive and yet not give birth, because it can go out to another.
Right, a woman, right, with surrogacy, a woman could conceive but not give birth. A woman could give birth but not conceive, right? But 3,500 years ago, that wasn't possible, right? So this is what's known as, in Hebrew, Lashon Yetera, right? Or in fancy academic terms, a pleonasm. Okay, I've taught you a new word, a pleonasm, right? Why is this a pleonasm? Because 3,500 years ago, you could not give birth without having conceived, right? So the phrase conceived in its original setting is superfluous, right? If you gave birth, you obviously conceived, right? But and this is strengthened by the fact that just a second, Charlie, the ritual purity that is incurred by the act of giving birth. Okay, if you have a miscarriage, you don't get this impurity. Okay, so it's not the conception that incurs the impurity or occasions the impurity, it is the birth. Okay, so there was one very prominent Orthodox rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the Israeli army when Israel recaptured Jerusalem. If you've ever seen pictures or movie of a rabbi blowing the shofar at the Western Wall, that's Rabbi Goren. And he then became the chief rabbi of Israel. And Rabbi Goren says that since we have this phrase conceives and gives birth, but conceives doesn't make sense in its original setting, so it must come to teach us something else. So Rabbi Goren rules that, yes, it's the conception that is determinative, right? So I don't know if I want to say that Rabbi Goren agrees with you, Dan, or you agree with Rabbi Goren, okay? But in either case, that is that position, right? But that is not the majority opinion, and it's not the way that we hold in the conservative movement, right? Because we have this principle, ubar yerech imo. Okay, a fetus is a part of its mother or an organ of its mother. And I've discussed this previously in the matter of abortion, right? Because one way we would allow abortion is that because a fetus is an organ of its mother, right? If your arm is gangrenous, you amputate the arm, right? So if the fetus is causing harm, we can amputate the fetus, as it were, but you have to have a good reason, right? If I wake up tomorrow morning and I go to the surgeon and I say, I had a vision last night and God told me to have my arm amputated, right? The surgeon would say, what you need is not a surgeon, what you need is a psychiatrist, right? But yes, so the fetus takes on the identity of the gestational birth mother, right? So if the birth mother is Jewish, the baby is born a Jew, right? And we actually intuitively know this because most conservative Jews know that if a pregnant woman converts, a pregnant woman converts, the baby is born Jewish, right? And that is, to my mind, really one of the few circumstances under which I'll speed up a conversion, right? Like under normal circumstances, you're not ready, let's wait a few months. But there are halachically good reasons why it's better for the baby to be born Jewish than to have to convert. So we speed up the conversion. But I mean, it's not really clear. I mean, in other words, Rabbi Goren's perspective, intuitively, that seems right? Because if you have Jewish genetic material, you're gonna say you're not Jewish, right? So, but our position in the conservative movement is that yes, the gestational and birth mother is determinative or decisive, but when I started like doing a deep dive, I found that we haven't even dealt with this since 1997. Okay, and the advances of scientific knowledge since then are not insignificant. Now, of course, we all know that there will be no more advances in scientific knowledge, but we can certainly look back on the previous 28 years and is that right? But the question really, I mean, it's basically, in a certain sense, it is a question of nature or nurture, and both are important, right? Both are important. I mean, if you look at my stepdaughter Berkeley, she has no Jewish genetic material, but she was raised as a Jew from a very young age. She's Jewish, right? On the other hand, I have, again, in Norwich, I had a friend who is a Baptist minister, okay, and a pretty fundamentalist evangelical minister, and he did some research because he was adopted. Turns out his birth mother was Jewish. So halachically, he's Jewish, right? If Reverend Lord, that was his name, actually Reverend Lord, if Reverend Lord came to my shul, could I give him an aliyah? No, right? Could I count him in the minyan? Also no, even though technically, halachically, he's Jewish. So, I don't know, it's interesting, right? What is it that really makes you a Jew? Is it genetics? Is it how you're raised? Is it how you're nurtured? And the answer really is both, I think. So you could legitimately say, either one is enough, or you could legitimately say, gotta be both. Right? Or, as Dan again said, pick one or the other, right? And what is clear to me is that there shouldn't be any ambiguity, right? You should not have a situation where somebody's Jewish here, but not Jewish there, right? It really, yeah.
So here's the thing, the possibility that, they and
Well, at birth, but yeah, infant, right? With infant conversion, we do all the time. Infant conversion we do all the time. It's not a problem. The reason that I say it's better that the they be born Jewish, like the possible, is because and we, again, there's another thing that maybe should be revisited, but we haven't, right? If the baby is a girl, when she grows up, she cannot marry a Cohen.
Right.
Okay, so we prefer, if possible, that to speed up the conversion. Now, I'm not gonna speed up the conversion, she walks into my office and she says, I'm meeting for it next week. Right, but if she's studying with me for 3 months and she's about to give birth and she's learned a lot and it's clear that she's seriously committed, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't convert somebody after 3 months, but if I would go ahead and do it, you know, with the promise that she will continue to study after, yeah.
What happened with the couple?
Oh, I have no idea what's my. I would imagine that God will form rabbi. I would imagine that God will form rabbi because the anger that has been created, I think it was unlikely that it would have gone to a pro forma conversion, but if, you know, if the other rabbi had said it sort of more gently, doesn't mean, I mean, sometimes we, as gentle as you can be, as affirming as you can be, there, you know, the guy is still gonna say no. No, but- yeah, I mean, again, I wasn't there, right, but I mean, I'm sure the complete sentence would have been, you're not Jewish, so we can do a quickie conversion. But as soon as the guy heard the first 3 words, you're not Jewish, that was it, okay, so that's what I'm saying. So, again, you know, look, I have been doing this now for 39 years, right? You cannot possibly please everyone, right? But when you have to have a difficult conversation, there are better ways than words, right?
By the way,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. All right. And with that. Yeah. Shabbat Shalom.